Intercell. We just got acquired by Renaissance, so that's gonna be, we part of a 30,000 people. Well, it was 18, they reduced recently. 18,000 people. So it's pretty big. They're like #1 in microcontrollers for automobiles.
Yeah, a friend of mine from college, she moved down there and she married a guy who worked at AMD. And now she's like a consultant for different stuff. Just them all off.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing how many there are.
Yeah.
People say, you know, computers are everywhere. And it's like, you find out how many different types of semiconductors there are. It's like, say, really are.
The number they're putting in a car is, it's hundreds. Someone told me the number, but it's like 600 in all these cars, stuff like that. In our company, they showed a slide the other day. They're pointing to like semiconductors. Well, of course, you have them in the control panels, but in engines and body parts and stuff like that, I guess with sensors. So they're everywhere. So. So we have a hiring, it's hard to get hired at our company right now because it's transition period, right? It's kind of, they'll come in, the acquisition, if it goes through, it'll end in around March. And so it's hard to get hired between then and before they kind of figure out what the new org chart will be. So between now and June, it'll be hard to hire anybody.
So,
A few
are you
teams.
buying them or are they buying you?
They're buying us. We were like 1,200 people, our company, and they were 18,000, so they covered us up.
Where are they based on?
Japan. And I couldn't tell you the city actually. But Japan, yeah.
Tokyo's always a good guess.
Yeah.
It's the capital, right?
Takes up most of the country, so they got big. They have groups, mostly like Japan, they have a bunch of people.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Sound
And the
like-
Twitter
They
handle
have,
is kind of strange.
I think groups somewhere like Thailand.
User error.
Somewhere like that.
Influencer.
They're not really very international compared to some
Mission
other
statement.
companies their size, you know.
Okay, come on.
Most of the people speak Japanese, right? Except for the executives.
Hey.
Speak English, but, you know,
Hey.
all the
But whenever-
contributors and even first level managers.
Hey.
So that,
Look at this one.
that would make it
Some
hard to
interesting words in there.
spread out too much.
Nothing like anything. I didn't see anything really cool. Just kind of there's like
So I think
crowdsource.
the way it's
It's
gonna
hard to read.
for us is they're pretty well.
You guys like pick a couple areas
Except
for
for we
something
have
like a
some
word.
or two, those will
Box.
integrate, but that's what you have.
Box.
Cloud, cloud's in there. Hidden.
You know, they're
Just share.
App stores in there.
You know, common services.
Mad.
But the big thing is in semiconductors is.
I feel like this is presentation's
Providing the
boring.
whole-
Everyone just stares at the
Yeah.
wall.
That's what's causing
Okay.
trouble because you go to a company, if you just have one chip in the family, but your competitor has like CPU
brains
and
in
power
there.
management and
What?
memory devices.
Wasn't it?
That's a huge attraction for these companies. Get it all from one company or the second source.
So, you know, I think were you there when we had dinner? And
I left before.
told, because some of us were in the on session about like list machines and Lisp on small devices. And we talked about list machines. And then I went out to where Rich Hickey was talking to some people and he was going on about, oh yeah, about what he wants development departments to go, and he mentioned list machines. And I mentioned it to Sam. And I guess Steve like always, Rich Hickey kept sitting next to Steve, right? Somehow. And then he kind of mentioned that, oh yeah, big little guy. And then I mentioned it to Rich Hickey, and I said to him, you know, I'd kind of like to know, you know, your thoughts on this machine. He said, you guys should. And so then Steve basically kind of volunteered Sam to do something about giving him speech on list machines. At some point, I don't know if here or if he wants him to apply it. If he goes to the next conj, he can say, you know, this was Rich Hickey's request.
Rich Hickey
Requested.
requested this time. Yeah, he's He's got something he wanted to show, which was about a. He's got like a virtual list, like some sort of emulator for one of the old list machines, and it shows off like the IDE and the all the tooling and stuff.
So does he like Lisp better than Smalltalk, or Smalltalk better than?
You know, who really knows?
Well, you've known him longer than most people.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, he can certainly talk at great lengths about both of them. Let me say that.
Yeah, I didn't go to the.
By volume, let's see, by volume of communication, I would have to say by volume, Smalltalk wins. But I can't say by if we weighted the volume by passion. I don't know.
If a genie could give him a Smalltalk machine or a Lisp machine, which would he take?
Well, see, here's the deal. Like the Lisp machines, they had actual like hardware. Yeah, the actual Lisp machine.
You can get like an
And
ideal.
Smalltalk was all software.
An
so.
ideal environment. Let's put it like that.
No, I'm just saying, like if he would. Today he would clearly choose the Lisp because Smalltalk is dead.
Don't tell him that. Don't tell him it's dead.
Well, you know, but you can
Break-
argue that it's
breaking
not
dreams.
dead because it was never really alive. But
But they don't tell you about
there
the
was a
small
renaissance.
talk.
There's an attempt I would say about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that. Sort of like a resurgence of Smalltalk. There's even like a Smalltalk podcast, and like the Squeak. When Squeak was sort of popular, and there was the Seaside, that continuation based web framework. See if I can find it here.
You were talking about some small talks that have made for some big company. It was like JP Morgan or something that did outperformed their mainframes or something, and sounded
The
pretty
thing is that he did that. I think he was part of that. So.
Yeah, so there's this
That's why I wanted
Seaside.
to talk about it.
Sounds cool. I mean,
Yeah, you can see it hasn't been there hasn't been any news about Seaside since 2006. But yeah, this was so around the time this came out, and originally the guy who did this was tried to develop Seaside as a continuation based framework in Ruby, but it didn't work out. So he took it to Smalltalk, and it's in the early days of Ruby on Rails. So there's a lot of the hipsters who kind of tried to revitalize the Smalltalk, but it didn't. It didn't end up going anywhere. But they still. It still exists. There are still Smalltalk companies. Squeak is still out there. If this is your ideal environment, then it's actually kind of cool.
Did you go to his talk in Round Rock?
No, I did not. At the at Tech Shop, I saw that, but I was too late to go.
That's pretty far north from me. I work pretty south. I live pretty close, but I work pretty far.
It's definitely got some cool. It's definitely got some cool stuff, but I think by now even Sam will admit that the Smalltalk ship has sailed
Or sunk.
or sunk. Yes. I think he'll admit that. I don't know. Well, you'll have to ask him.
You should implement Smalltalk in the JVM.
Yes, there is. It is.
And look, there's JSqueak or so. There's something.
No, it's red. What is it? Red something.
I haven't been updated in a long time.
Smalltalk. Yeah, I don't know the current status of it, but Redline Smalltalk. Fork me on GitHub. Let's see when the last commit was. 4 years. Ooh. Okay. Well, I was about to say I know there was some activity 3 or 4 years ago.
3 years ago for the pencils.
Ooh. Well, let's see about their push to version 1.0. The build is passing though. Close.
Oh, it's because they didn't hit their goal.
Yeah, they were.
If they hit the goal, they would.
See, all you guys in there with $2,715 in your pocket, you are the reason that this didn't succeed.
Everyone gave
You
$1.
personally are responsible for the death of Small talk on the JVM. I hope you're proud of yourself.
Small talk on the
No, I
$7,000 that didn't support it, or
Yeah.
that didn't succeed, right?
yeah.
I think Dar said he talked to Rich Hickey to ask him like what plugins he used in Emacs, and he used like 2 plugins. It's like Inferior Lisp and like I don't know if it was like some sort of paren thing was the other one.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah, you
basically
know what?
nothing.
All of the, not just Rich Hickey, but all of those guys at, well, most of the guys at Cognitech, they actually have very primitive development environments. They don't use any of the tooling. They don't.
Apparently they don't do web development.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, they do. I mean, they do consulting and projects and stuff. They just don't use any. Yeah.
doesn't even use Cider.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some sense, it's
He's doing
understandable.
Clojure,
Be,
he's probably doing more Java.
yeah. He writes more Java code than he writes Clojure code. Right. You know,
Yeah.
to develop code, because Clojure's written on the JVM. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't think, I mean, I don't know what he did, I don't know, I would guess he actually writes very little Clojure code overall. Maybe some Datomic stuff here and there, right?
But I mean, like I guess like all of like all the functions and stuff are written in Clojure, and or a lot of the functions or whatever. Like if you look at the source code for like transducer and stuff, isn't it written in Clojure?
Yeah.
I
But,
guess there's Java stuff.
well, yeah, but there's all the underlying stuff too, which I suspect is where he spends
Okay.
more of his time. And I think a lot of the Clojure side of stuff is probably written by the other guys at there.
So he's sacrificing for us.
Yep,
He writes the Java. So we
Rich
don't have
Hickey
to.
faces the Java so that we don't have to.
That's nice.
So this is my very first time here, so maybe all y'all have been here a couple of more times, but.
Oh, yeah, we should probably,
What's going on, right?
yeah, we should probably, when we get started, maybe we'll do some, we've got, nobody volunteered with a second, we're actually past 7. Okay, I guess we will get started. I thought we were like still 6:45 or so.
Good,
So-
it means I'm not late. Alright.
Yeah, okay, yeah, well, maybe we'll do a quick round of Nola's not here to make us do introductions, so I'm gonna pretend like, I'll be Nola over here. Why don't we introduce ourselves? Oh, okay, let's do that.
I took that role this time.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start. I'm Norman. I work at ThreatGrid. I've been doing Clojure since the first meetup here in the Austin Clojure meetup, which is we're just a couple of weeks away, I think, from being 5 years old.
Alright, I'm Ryan, and I do Clojure as a hobby, and I want to do it. I'd love to do it production, like full stack Clojure.
I'm Justin, and I also do it as a hobby.
So my name's Earl, not as a hobby, but the last time I actually did anything in Lisp was 15 years ago. I have a cybersecurity company, and we're using Lisp as our back end and using Clojure, and so I wanted to come and learn a little bit more about what the guys are actually doing.
Well, we'll have to talk to you because me and Dar both work for a security company too. So we might pass some
We'll
notes.
crush you.
What's that?
Crush you.
I'm Dar. I work with Norman and Cisco ThreatGrid. Mostly on like API stuff and some front-end stuff.
I'm Amanda, I just hang out.
Well, you hang out, what do you do when you're not hanging out?
Figure it out.
I'm Eric. I also make Linux. I happen to hope to do it as a job. I work at Accenture with I told people that they should make a Clojure contract, little like special name tags, which they get Clojure in your company. No, that's not gonna happen. So people like don't even bother asking if I can get a company Clojure because that's not going
Yeah, I'd love to hear why people are resistant to adoption.
Well, a lot of the work we do is for state governments, and they kind of make the decisions. Like one of the projects we're on is JDK 6. And they kind of like to shift people around, and so something obscure is probably not a good idea.
I would say most companies using Clojure were not companies that switched to Clojure, but that started off in Clojure. I think it's a language that either you want to do it or you don't. And if you're not doing it, you probably don't want. Right. I mean, I can't imagine going in and taking a Java team and then saying, "Hey guys, let's do some Lisp," right? That's my impression.
It was like maybe if I used to be a Bank of America for about 9 years, and maybe if I was there, churn of people. So I had the same desk and I worked with the same group for like 5 years. Here it's like, people come and go all the time.
But were you doing any Lisp at B of A?
No.
And to show my naivety, I don't fully know where to differentiate between Lisp and Clojure and differentiation, so I'll just be naive.
There actually was a common list group that met like twice, wasn't it?
But
Maybe
Clojure is
a
like the
couple more
new
times than that.
evolution past Common Lisp, right? So I understood, okay.
Yeah, there's no real, there's no, Clojure's one of those languages where there's no standard, there's just the implementation. So.
My name's Pete. I work at a company called Intercell Semiconductor Company. And being a hardware company and being a software person there, I can just declare we're going to use Clojure. So that's what we're doing. We've mostly done Java development, and we're just kind of migrating Clojure in. We do a lot of modeling of the way the chip behaves and the interfaces. So we do that model. We're starting to do that modeling in Clojure, but then the UI part would be Java effects, which is what we're using for. And eventually we'll use some kind of Clojure-driven Java effects maybe. Or something.
Sam was doing some Java FX with Clojure.
Did he ever give a
Yeah.
talk on that, or is that?
Yeah, he did give a talk at one, or he at least gave a demo, like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago on it.
He likes those macro languages, FX Clojure, FXFN or something. There's about 3 of them. They don't get maintained much, somebody just whips off these
Yeah, yeah.
wrappers and then when it breaks, they don't fix it. We kind of find it's not that hard not using that, just going directly from Clojure to JavaFX is fine. And when we know more about why it's not, then we look at these macro languages.
Yeah, I find that's true for a lot of the wrapper stuff. It's like it's really nice to play with, and do it, but then you kind of want to, make your own and just use the underlying stuff. But sometimes the abstraction's really good, and you can stick with it. It
They're a
just
great
depends.
place to look for ideas. If you don't use it, you can still look at it ways to solve one particular problem and just rather than invest into the whole thing.
Yeah, we've had a hard time getting a good UI figured out to try to explain what we're doing underneath, and so it's been maybe some Java or D3 and trying to figure out different ways to drive it, but haven't seen a good way to answer what the UI, what the front end would need to look like if you've got anything running Clojure on the back end.
Well, our challenges were desktop strictly, right? And because a lot of our customers some of our customers are Chinese, you can't even bring your computer into their lab. It's so secure, right? It's very hard for apps engineers to do anything there. They have to run outside the lab, and they have to look stuff up in their laptop, and then they have to run in and help the guy with the solution. So there's no way they can use web-serve technology or download stuff from the web. So we have to bring it in on a disk or something like that, or a stick, and then even then they're gonna be careful with it. So plus some of the stuff we do is it's like an IDE, the interface. You have to have a lot of related windows that are tying to each other. I'm not sure how we would do that in a browser environment. I guess maybe you do a bunch of different browser windows, but I'm not sure that would be a better experience than the desktop experience yet. So, but we are seeing this conflict in that another group is doing like first entry tools where instead of they haven't bought our chips yet, they're thinking about it. So they want to go to the web and they want to build a system and get going and see what the models say as far as what kind of performance they're going to get from the chips. And then after they say go, then they would come to the desktop. So a completely different group is doing it. Actually, they outsourced it, but there's gonna eventually be a lot of this overlap because they're trying to do the same math that we do, and so it's kind of, at some point, someone's gonna realize we should really just have one solution and not write everything twice.
There's like Electron.js, that's like what the Atom editor does, so it's JavaScript as a desktop application. I mean, the Atom editor is pretty slick. You can pull up like the Chrome dev tools in the editor itself.
Okay.
But that was nifty.
Well, yeah,
But it's
that-
like,
that's
it's a full
actually true.
desktop application.
So you get, I mean, the
And
big.
it's and you could deploy it as web. I'm assuming.
Yeah, just the same way like on your phone, like half of your apps, even though they look like native apps, they're really just web. It's just a web browser, you know, and you know, inside of it, right? That's basically what that's basically what the editor is. Just a big web window that, you know, instead of going to a web server or using a web browser, it's just JavaScript, you know. Running.
But the missing piece for us is
But
like
your
documents.
JavaFX is probably much more richer than that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd
For-
have to look at the Electron. But the big piece that's differentiating is the idea of a docking frame system, right? Where you can have 4 windows beside each other, and one can be tabs, and then you can drag a tab and you can pull it out to another. You can, so the trouble with our customers, some of them are gonna run, or demos our marketing team will do, will be on something like this, but then the actual engineers, they're gonna use, you know, dual 30-inch monitors or something, because they're gonna wanna see the Bodhi plots and the power map and all this stuff at the same time, so that's why those type of environments work well like that. I'm not sure if Electron.js
I'm
can
not sure either.
do something
But
like
yeah,
that.
I think,
Sure,
I
you
mean,
could
that's
roll
just an
your own.
example of an application that's a JavaScript application, that kind of emulate, you know, does what a desktop application would, but, I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing special about it, right? I mean, it's just a web, you know, it's a web frame that you put content in, right?
Yeah.
And the content looks like a desktop application, right? So,
I know JavaFX can run it can act like a browser, right? So we might look into some of our panels, right? We're doing all these different panels. We probably have 600 panels. Make these panels as web pages, and then you just stick them in a JavaFX frame, and then at some point you just dump the whole JavaFX when you know more about these other technologies and stuff like that. So.
yeah, it's interesting because we don't, I mean, I think 99% of Clojure people who are doing things are doing web-based stuff. And of the remaining 1%, 99% of those are doing like strictly back-end things. And there may be like that 1% or 1% who's, you know, trying to do some sort of
Yeah.
desktop UI or something like that.
Yeah, no, it scares me because it's not just, I mean, Clojure is an extreme example, but everywhere else it's happening too. And, you know, we're finding bugs in JavaFX under Java 8, right? And this used to work, so we're getting worse quality in the newer version of Java than the older versions, but you gotta go for it because the hardware will stop getting supported, so it it's looking like a dying technology to me.
So where's your company based on?
So we're distributed, we're about 15 people. I just moved here from DC because my wife's from the area, so I'm one of the people helping to clog the roads. But it was either we live on Capitol Hill and raise our kids there, or live here and raise our kids here. It was like, we're gonna move here. So grandma's at home with the kids right now, so I'm able to come by here.
Well, let me give
3
you
years
the
old.
obligatory go back to California, which we give to everybody who's not from,
Exactly.
who's not from
Well,
Texas.
of course I've been to California too. Around.
I don't know if you've gotten that yet, but there's like,
I try to preface it with wife was from here, went to school here.
yeah, but no matter
tried
where
to-
you're from, people tell you to go back to California.
There's actually more people from other parts of Texas here.
I find a lot of people, yeah, from DC.
Said in other parts of Texas.
So we have, right now, just 2 people here, 2 people back in DC, 1 in England, 3 in Poland, 3 in California,
So who are your clients?
banking and US government. So when you say B of A, that could be interesting to discuss. So my background is banking and government.
Do you have to have some kind of security clearance or something to do?
Nope.
Yeah,
And those would show up and we keep them partitioned anyway, so. Yeah, so your Chinese clients, I'm well familiar with some of the other challenges it goes through with that one. And you just put up a firewall, between components of the firm. It doesn't who your clients are. So we just some hoops to jump through.
Yeah, we had customer early on. We had an appliance version of our product, and we had customers in, I believe it was Saudi Arabia, and I remember like we would have it'd be late. It would be late at night because of anyway, well out of our times because of the time difference, and they're like calling back, calling out to try to get instructions on how to configure the appliance, and like barely able. They're not able to get on the network, for security reasons, and like trying to communicate to install this, really primitive hardware. So it's definitely some challenges.
It's proven advantageous to have some people spread across some time zones, right? So from far west coast to Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've kind of already started, but does anybody else have any Clojure questions? We always start off things they want to toss out to the group, ask about.
Well, I'll toss out, because we kind of already started, so cybersecurity, we've got a couple cybersecurity companies, and we're using it to help identify anomalies that you hadn't previously looked at. So it seems like it's really good from using it from a machine learning approach, and so that's kind of what we focused on. And ever since I took from some of my initial research and working with a couple other guys, I said, oh, we should do this in Lisp. And I was like, hey, I remember that from my undergrad. All right, let's do that. And it kind of made sense from there. Pete, when I was listening to your description, I was thinking, why would you choose Clojure for some of the hardware, software modeling challenges rather than any of the other number of solutions that are out there? What is it that makes it so unique?
The big initial interest was concurrency. Our data is getting pretty big. Some of the newer chips have, like a typical chip that does some control might have 20 registers, and we have ones that are medium sized that are 150, but now we're making these chips with like 6,000 registers and related values, and the amount of data is big, and we have to load it in when somebody's getting ready to configure their system. And so we're trying to do a lot of concurrency. And in Java we could have done it, but we would have needed I think a smarter team that talked a lot more and strategized a lot more, and everybody was on exactly the same page, because in Clojure it seems like there's just a lot more simplicity to it, right, with immutable data objects and all the talks Rich talked about, a lot of it's around this area of how to keep concurrency simple. So I knew we could have done it, but every time we hired somebody, it would have been either a lot of training or it would have gone off in the weeds again. So, but kind of started with this book. Actually, Rich talked about it, Java Concurrency in Practice. Have you heard of this book? Yes, he talks, you have to read this book. And before he said it, someone on my team said, this is a good book, you should read it, right? So I read this book, and it told you all the reasons Java doesn't work, and immutability doesn't work, and all that stuff, right? And it was all good points, and it talked about what you should do instead. But there was a ton of code examples of what not to do, and no code examples of what to do, right? All the to do were just in vague statements, right? So we said, well, we could do this, right? So we started writing immutable objects, like our custom proprietary objects in Java, and it was hell. I mean, you had all these, you had to do all these like little builders that made sure nobody could touch the class, they were immutable. You had these builder classes, and then we found later some of these, I guess they'd be like macro languages, maybe using annotations or something like that to do immutability, but it's so abstracted away from what code's running that it's going to be hard to debug, and it just looked kind of like a trick, right? And so, it was just bad. It wasn't really it was a step forward, but it wasn't much of a step forward. There's a lot of code to maintain. So then I just started saying we might want to just go to Clojure, because obviously it does all the things that this book wanted you to do, right? So then I was really mad at the book. It's like, this is really irresponsible, telling you that this doesn't work, and then saying you can do this, but not really proving it, and then it just led us off on a wild goose chase. But then when we started sketching out our model again in Clojure, it was so fast. It was amazing, right? A big part of our problem is understanding the domain, right? It's digital power. It's a new concept. There's probably 10 people in the world that really understand it. So we have to have a lot of hand-holding from our apps team. And so we already encapsulated that in the Java, but it's in Java, right? Now rewriting in Clojure, with Clojure being such a great language, having passed that step of understanding, it's just going like lightning. It's amazing how fast. And then, from then on, once we get there, it'll be a lot more maintainable. What I really want as a manager is us not, when somebody says, we get a lot of, we're really unorganized on the application side and the customer help side, right? It's not like we have a lot of vision. Well, we have a lot of vision, but it turns out a lot of it's wrong, right? So these great ideas come in, or a customer need comes in, and it's like, well, if you can do this, we win a client, we'll get, an extra $10 million, but we need this done in 2 weeks kind of thing. I mean, if your code isn't really well developed, there's no way we can do it, but I could see a path to that kind of stuff with Clojure. Just not so much that it's Clojure, but it's so functional, just so much more Lego-like, just taking pieces and reusing it. But with Java, you really have to focus on writing good code. Code review constantly, train people, try and hire more experienced people. You can't really hire junior people in order to keep the code in a manner that you could reuse it and put it together well. Because if it just naturally falls into chaos and you end up with all these bindings, and someone always says, oh yeah, you can reuse this module, I wrote it, I did a great job, and once you try it, it's like, oh, but I gotta hook this in and that in and bring that over, and that does 90% of what that does is stuff we don't even need here, so it just doesn't work. So we've had good luck, people debugging right out of, I hire people from the UT ECE program. They're just awesome in that they understand semiconductors, embedded systems, and firmware, but they've had some experience in higher level languages like Java, so they fit in really well. And but they still aren't going to have the kind of habits you need to do what we want in Java and keep it highly reusable and maintainable. So I think with Clojure we can do that. Us trying to find somebody who knows semiconductors and large scale development, it's almost impossible. I mean, there's a lot of genius programmers working at semiconductor companies, but they're never writing a program that's bigger than 10,000 lines, right? They're usually more like 2,000 or 3,000 lines, a lot of complicated math, but the actual amount of communication and connection and graphics is trivial. So finding people that know how to deal with, like our code somewhere like north of 250,000 lines of Java. So it's getting pretty big. A lot of that's just because we support 60 products now, not one or two. So having people that can understand the chips and digital power, but also understand large-scale software is pretty well impossible to find. So the best way to do it is find people that know some digital power or power technology, and then it's easier to train them on the software side than, train them on the digital side, period. And for me, training on the digital power side, I don't understand stuff, so I couldn't do it. I'd have to beg from my boss to, allocate people to do it. So that's hard to do.
Cool.
mention, and I'll just keep throwing questions.
Sure.
Normally
Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Direct which way you go, is scalability. So you started to talk to scalability, but it's one of the things that I look at. I mean, we deal in massive data amounts, a lot of threat intelligence coming in. And so it's, until we fully put everything through the paces, I'm wondering, will Clojure be able to scale as much as I need it?
Yeah, so that's the kind of problem, I mean, we're in a similar field, so there's exactly the kind of problems that we had, and that's one of the reasons we went with Clojure, is because, modern problems tend to be data oriented, not code, not code oriented, but data oriented. And Clojure is just a brilliant environment for working with data, right? I mean, that's kind of almost the point of functional programming is manipulating data. So it's been really, if your problems are data problems, Clojure is a pretty good hammer to whack it with.
Yeah, it's a good choice.
Yep.
You can't really lose. I mean, it can do. We used to use a tool called Antler. Have you ever heard of Antler? It's like Yex, Lex and Yak kind of stuff. It's language building type of stuff, but it was just too single threaded, and it was a great tool, but it didn't work for us. We were breaking it in half, and that didn't work too well for us, and we rewrote it in Clojure. And somebody said to me, I think it was Steve, said, yeah, Clojure tends to, solve problems that other languages can't get there.
That's what I keep hearing. Yeah, I mean, huge multi-threading is one of the key areas. I mean, personally, my development skills suck, right? Like Eclipse was the last thing I played, but I'm doing other stuff.
Yeah. I don't think if there's anything you'd be weak at, right?
Embedded systems.
Yeah.
So I guess the question for you is why Clojure and another form of Lisp?
So what we're looking at, so I don't know enough to what I know about, but it was more like I discovered that Lisp as a language, pure Lisp, like that's kind of like what I learned on, like if we go back to Pascal days, right? So that's where I started. And it was only as we got into this company and I was like, well, what are the latest things in Lisp? And Clojure kept coming up. And so the fellow that's doing the engineering, I asked him, so what about this Clojure? He goes, yeah, we're already using Clojure. I said, great. What is that? And he started describing a lot of the same things that I've heard here. And I'm like, all right, I don't have the time to really get into any more details of it. Let's. So that's why I wanted to come by here.
Well, I'll kind of tackle that question for a second here, because it kind of relates to why the Austin Clojure Meetup exists in the first place.
Yeah.
So about 5 years ago, Sam, the founder of the Meetup, who's not here tonight, he was talking about putting together a meetup, and he's like, and he's, as we were talking, he's the guy we were talking about before the meeting. It's like, well, he's like, maybe I should do a small talk meetup. Maybe we should do a Lisp meetup, or should we do like a functional programming? And I'm like, okay, I'm more interested in Lisp, so why don't we do a Lisp meetup? And he's like, yeah, okay. And then we're like, well, do we want to be like Lisp or Common Lisp, or my university Lisp was all Scheme, so I'm Scheme, Sam's Common Lisp, and we're like, well, what do we actually want to do? And we're like, well, yes, there are people using Lisp in the real world for real world things, but there's this thing called Clojure, and it seems to be getting some traction, and it runs on the JVM, which we're all using already, and it's a growing community, and it's it's got all the Java stuff, so we don't have to worry about libraries, and as much pain as you can you may or may not have had with memory management, with JVMs and heap sizes and things like that. It's kind of a known constant everywhere, and so it just seemed like an interesting place to invest, right? Because why would you do Common Lisp, which is still used by people, but is not nobody's going to tell you that Common Lisp is the community is growing, or that it's that it's this place that's springing out fresh ideas. I mean, you go to a Common Lisp forums or something, and it's the same people talking about the same things for the last 10 years, right? I mean, it's not exactly a dynamic growing community, and there are some there are some groups like the racket guys, but right, there are some niches where there's some growing communities, but it just seemed like if any Lisp has some potential, it was Clojure. And on top of that, coupled with the fact that Clojure was actually trying to be kind of almost like a new kind of Lisp, meaning really focusing on the immutability, all of the modern concerns, really focusing on that and not focusing on all the cool things that was really cool that made Lisp an interesting technology in the 1980s, right? Like it's great that Common Lisp solves a lot of the engineering problems that people had in the 1980s, but like maybe it's a perspective of like, well, we want the new, like what are you going to do for today, right? And so that's sort of how the we became the Clojure Meetup, and we didn't become the Common Lisp Meetup or the Scheme Meetup or the we love parentheses Meetup.
So has Rich Hickey ever given a talk about why he made Clojure? Because I kind of overheard him
Actually asked him that question.
very briefly
at
on
the
saying
conference.
reusability and
He
common
said he's never given that talk. So.
And he said it was just too hard to do, so he just decided to make a new language.
So does that mean there's a common like Clojure con that I'm just not aware of that you guys are referring to?
There was a conj.
Yeah, they call it the conj. Which is
Yeah, it was the next thing we're going to talk about is we just had the big Clojure conch here in Austin
Conference.
last week.
December
Oh,
1st.
great, totally.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that.
Well, if you weren't in California,
Yeah, exactly. I tried to make it to the last meetup, and I would have known that, but
Yeah, the last
Actually,
meetup
the
we
last
had.
meetup was the day before the conj.
even better. We could have gotten 2 hall passes. That would have been allowed. So.
So we can continue the conversation. So after the meetup, we moved downstairs to the bar so we can continue discussions down there. We did want to talk a little bit about Clojure cons, and like always, whenever we have a big conference, I like to get everybody who was there to say like, what was the most what was it like if somebody who wasn't there, what's the one talk they should see, or maybe the one thing you heard about there that you think people should look into. So Dar was there. What's the
Barliman.
what?
Was it Barliman or?
Barleyman? Yeah, that was pretty cool. You stole mine, man.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it was on the Saturday.
He's writing synthetic source code.
So this is William Byrd. He did all the he was the guy along with Dan Friedman who gave all of the mini Cameron talks at past conges, the stuff that CoreLogic was built on. CoreLogic being the logic engine that was one of the reasons we chose Clojure at ThreatGrid was to do the logic program.
One of those little schema books.
Yeah, is the
Not the little schema, but one of those other ones.
the reasoned schemer.
Yeah.
Yeah, William Byrd was the co-author of Reasoned Schemer.
I did not know that
Oh.
you were that close to greatness.
So yeah, this was really cool. If you didn't see this talk, it was pretty cool to see what they were. So in the past, they've used mini Cameron, basically CoreLogic, to generate programs, and in this case, they're actually using it. If you've got some pieces of programs and some pieces of tests, it can actually generate the missing pieces. So you've got a little bit of code and you've got some test cases. It can tell you what pieces of code you can fill in to your code to make it past the test cases.
It's like test-driven development at a new level. Just give it tests and it'll write the code for
Yeah,
you.
it was really cool. So
Fix this part.
So his sort of his sort of like novel idea was the idea that like instead of going to your IDE, you can write your test first. You write your test first, but if you write your test first and maybe give it a little bit of a shell, you can have the IDE guide you to what a correct solution, a correct implementation would be. And so that was a really cool application. Whether that's something that's feasible or not, who knows? But it was a great talk. So thank you, Dar, for stealing my favorite talk. You got one?
I don't know the hardcore CS3, but I don't think you ever defined what is the halting problem.
Oh, the halting problem.
I mean, I got there, maybe he did, because I went in there.
He didn't talk about the halting problem, but the halting problem is given if you have a program, can you write another program that will tell if that program will ever stop? The answer is no. Because if you could write a program to do that, you could write your program could tell if it would do that and then do the opposite thing, right? It's like time travel, right? So it's paradox. So for Doctor Who reasons, you can't do it.
So what were some of the talks on Friday?
Did you miss Friday?
No, I just can't remember what was on what day.
All right, I'll pull it up here Friday.
Another one I really liked was the Saeed talk.
Yeah, that was my favorite.
That was the Emacs tracing thing. Yeah, so basically,
I like the Clara talk.
we'll get to that in just a second. Yeah, so this was pretty cool in that he built some tool. Basically, it instruments your code and then traces all the activity and then shows that to you in interesting ways. So, and he had a email. It's kind of cool because he took something that's sort of an understood idea, but actually implemented it and gave it a interesting looking Emacs interface, and definitely worth watching just to get some ideas from. And you were saying what, Claire? That was the rules one, right?
Yeah. Because we don't use Clara at work. We use a different proprietary rules engine that no one's ever heard of, and I drive me like them. But basically, we do like Medicaid systems for different states, and so there's a web app that gathers information, and it sends information to the rules engine, and then spits back like who in the family should get which benefits. Which I mean, when the other rules talk, whatever her name was,
Paula?
I didn't really quite get what she was doing.
Okay.
It seems like that was that was not. When you say when you talk about rules development or rules, Clara's most people think of. I didn't quite understand what she was doing.
Yeah. So with Paula actually works with us at ThreatGrid.
It sounds like she was doing rules on the entire database or something, which is a little.
Yeah. I actually did not attend. I was talking with somebody out in the hallway during that talk. So I know a little bit about it, but based on but that it's a different team from ours at ThreatGrid that's doing it. We have 2 Clojure teams, and this is something from the other team. So I have a little bit of insight, but I didn't actually see the talk yet. I will be watching it.
Did you see the
I did. It's deep.
Yeah, so we do a lot of logic and rules kind of stuff. So we're extremely heavily invested in core logic to do our analysis, and then they have a different kind of analysis they want to do. So they're implementing a different kind of logic rules engine to handle that.
Sounds like she was doing stuff before.
Yeah, well, that's so they've been developing this. It's based on some other. It's based on some work that she had done prior to joining on. So I should have already watched it, but I have not watched it. So it's on my list.
I liked Eric Norman's talk too.
Which one?
Eric Norman.
I was just going to ask about that one. The Composable Abstractions. Yeah, that's like. I think I would have liked it too. What do you think of it?
It really wasn't as much of a how-to as you would have thought. It was kind of more like rah-rah Clojure, which is fine.
Maybe that's what I'm trying to.
So I heard from somebody who went to his unsession that he was hoping to do the talk, and then the unsession is sort of like a practice. Like here's my ideas. If you want to try out my technique, come to the unsession and we'll actually do it. But for scheduling reasons, that didn't work out. And so they had the unsessions where they tried to do it and nobody knew what they were doing. And then the main talk where he told everybody why they should go to the unsession and do it. And then no unsession to go to actually try it out. So he kind of got shafted a little bit there, I guess.
That's unfortunate. So not to bore people, but my whole doctoral research was using biologically inspired defenses for cyber defense. And so we have a mechanism of using swarm-based intelligence, so like bees and ants, and even emergent properties like with snowflakes and fractals and things like that, to build small components of your representation, bring all that together so you've got an enterprise view. Clojure seems to work really well in that approach. So the idea of being able to abstract out something so it can be more easily seen and viewed across the enterprise or across the space that you're trying to apply and have some understanding, works really well. So that seems like it would have been interesting, because at least the power that I saw back in Lisp and from what I picked up with Clojure is the ability to, if you need something, you just create it. If you need a type, if you need a class, if you need a specific capability, you just create it. You're not restricted by the language or anything that's established. And so that lets it be really flexible, especially to create that dynamically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely worth a watch. I will say, I guess maybe in some ways I'm kind of dense sometimes, because talks that are all like idea and no like actual thing, I have a hard time getting. So I'll confess I didn't understand Eric Norman's talk very well.
It's
Yours
really
is-
hard to teach.
Pick a really good metaphor is basically what he was like. Pick a bad metaphor, pick a better metaphor. It's like a relatable physical metaphor for your thing. That was like the 30 seconds. He really talked about it forever. But it's like pick a good metaphor, and then anyone will be able to understand your really complicated stuff because you picked this.
Because you'd have this
Relatable.
brilliance of a great metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was worth a watch, but I will say that I didn't get a lot of value from that talk, because I need a little more concreteness.
Concurrency?
No, concreteness. Speaking of talks I completely didn't understand, can anybody explain what Rich Hickey was suggesting we do? Because I confess.
Don't break stuff.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you're gonna redo it, if you're gonna
Pick a new name. That's what I got.
He was
Pick
pretty
a new
super
name.
here because he was kind of not, I think Sam liked it, but Steve did not.
Steve was just like, just change the version number, it's fine. And like, I guess he didn't, I guess he wasn't following that, like, so in Clojure, if you change your library number or whatever, you move your major version up, but then multiple things are asking for it, it'll just pick whichever version it wants. You can suggest, I want this version. You can't lock it into a version. So like, you can get stuck where like, you're on these different versions of breaking changes. But if you change the literal name of the library from foo to foo2, then it would have foo2 and foo would be included. Because it sees them as independent stuff. So it's like, if you're gonna change your API, leave the old stuff in place, add new functions, new names, let the user use that, and then,
It kind of
then you're good
seems
to go.
taking the immutability hammer and,
Yeah.
trying to use it where it's not really quite fit.
No, it's a great point in the sense that, I mean, you do get into this problem with dependencies. Like everybody has to buy into the new version, and if the new version changes, and you don't, oftentimes that just doesn't work, right? But you got to remember, Steve is also coming from an OSGI world, where you can just like have 15 versions of a Java library in one Java virtual machine. I mean, your code, it becomes this massive to do this much work, but so for I can certainly see from his perspective, why maybe he doesn't see that pain. But no, we have a large Clojure code base, and it's not a big pain, but I mean, when we upgrade some web, let's say we want to upgrade a library, we're like, okay, we want to upgrade Composure, right? Well, we're going to look at the other things that are below that. Do they need to be upgraded, or does this one, this Composure now requires, this routing version of the routing library, but this other thing has a weird dependency on it, and it's nothing we can't test and deal with, but it's I mean, there's definitely a lot of for a large prod. This is the same problem you'd have in Java, right? I mean, whenever except for Java maybe gives you a few more warnings, but outside of running tests, that whether or not your stuff is like at least type compatible. But I mean, how many times I don't know, you upgrade a Java library and some weird thing breaks.
I did think it was funny when William Byrd said, after listening to Chicky's talk, this will always be version 4.3 forever and ever.
Yeah, so I guess I did take his advice to heart a little bit, because I'm working on an upgrade to a feature for something at work, and I'm like, I was in there, and I was changing some functions in this namespace. I'm like, well, we kind of don't want to change these functions over here, because the old stuff kind of still wants to use this right? And if I just create a new namespace and implement the new version of it in a new namespace, this new code can use the new version, the old one can use the old one, and then when we really rip this out, we just get rid of this stuff rather than trying to change this and have them both depend on it, right? So, so I guess, I mean, maybe I did take, accidentally take away some insight from the talk without realizing it.
So does anyone, before you go,
Oh.
you can go back, he kind of didn't talk much about denotational design. Does anyone know what it is?
No.
Okay.
I've heard denotational design, and at one point I thought I knew what it was, and now I don't even know what it is. I thought I knew what it was because I attended like a Scala meetup or a Haskell meetup or something, and they were talking about it. I'm like, oh, those are words I understand, but no.
I think he said that the talk originally was going to follow it,
Yeah.
and then he like read more about it and just figured out it was orthogonal to what he wanted to talk about. So he's like, sorry, it's not about that
It
anymore.
was like, oh, sorry, I wrote this abstract before I knew what I was going to talk about. That was basically it. Which at least he was honest about. There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than people who like submit talk ideas to conferences with absolutely no idea what they're going to do, and then they come up and the talk's not hastily put together and completely not related. At least he was honest about it, and he said like, hey, I thought this was what I wanted to talk about, but I realized what I really wanted to say was something else. Anything else? People who were there, interesting talk. You think people should?
I think Reframe's cool if you're doing like Clojurescript stuff. Like we were doing stuff with Reagent, and the whole we never really understood how to use Reframe, but I think we finally figured it out after talking to people. It's just the beauty of having like one global state that literally everything is in, so then you can just touch it and do whatever you want to it. Whereas before, like the way we were using Reagent, we had like all sorts of like local scope and stuff, so like you created an atom inside the function, so it's nice and encapsulated. But then when you try to debug something, it's just a nightmare. Like you can't get access to it. Whereas like now, like with the Reframe pattern or whatever, right? You have like this global atom, and then you have like subscriptions to it, and then like handlers and.
So
Seems
basically,
cool.
it's becoming Ohm.
Yeah, it's cool.
Sure.
that is funny because it's like originally they were like, hey, this thing, they shouldn't have all your stuff together like Ohm does it. Let's split all this stuff out, and then now I guess the thing is, hey, yeah, maybe we shouldn't split all this stuff. We should put it all in one big atom like Ohm does.
And then there's this cool thing called Refrisk, which gives you like a little like drop down box on your web page, and you can like go through the session atom. Like you can search through it, pops up on your web page. He shows it in the talk. It's pretty cool to like visualize your data and like these different data structures and stuff. They claim there's someone that's running 50,000 lines of code with Reframe, some company somewhere. Apparently people are using that for big
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, we need I guess we need somebody to do a Reframe talk.
It's really complicated.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to. Let me see who I can get there.
I've thought
Anybody?
about it.
Any? Well, if somebody wants to dig into that, we could use a talk on that.
Maybe after some time.
Yeah. You can do a little demo or something.
We could do
But
a
Sam commented on the meetup. He's probably telling us he's on his way. Let's find out.
demo in January.
All right. Anything else?
Well, I wanted to see the unsession on embedded Clojure and Lisp, but I didn't make it to that. Did anyone go to that?
Yeah.
Was it any good?
It was all right. I mean, from what I remember, he talked a lot about just, all the different controllers and how much memory they have, and then he and Sam started talking about Lisp machines.
Oh no, that was the unsession, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
I
Is
did
that
like
search-
Stuart Halloway's talk, even though it was a bit of a repetition.
Oh yeah. That was actually I some people didn't seem to think it was very interesting, but I thought that was
He's a super cool guy.
yeah. I thought it was quite interesting how how they took the thing that they solved one way and then try to do it again using the newer tools.
I really like the talk that he gave here the night before.
Yep.
That should be online as well. If anybody missed it.
Yeah, we recorded that, right? Okay, so that's probably around. All right, cool.
So I'm looking around on the site. Do I have to register to be able to get the videos?
It's on YouTube.
It's in YouTube.
Oh, it's YouTube, it's not
Yeah.
off of the.
Clojure TV
Clojure
on
phone.
YouTube.
Yeah, Clojure TV. Playlist
And
of
then-
all the talks.
The videos for this meetup are on Austin Tech Live.
Oh, for this, excellent.
Yeah, Austin Ruby had one like a month ago, and for some reason it's muted because they said there was some copyrighted song or something on it, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
That desk Nova, so, it was one I wanted to go to, and I look and it's like silent.
I don't know, maybe it was picked up the lobby music or something like that, who knows? Yeah, who knows what was in there. All right, well, so we'll go ahead and get on to the, my thing. So it's just gonna be a little short demo of something new that I've been playing with that I thought was pretty interesting. It is called Macchiato. And I was trying to, so it's extremely new, in fact. I just found out about it
What is it?
like 2 weeks ago.
Yoga pose.
What?
Yoga pose.
Yeah, yeah. Is it Yog, not Yog? I don't know.
We were hoping he'd be the conj, but we didn't see him.
Yeah. So this is so what this is this. So I've been spending a lot of my free Clojure time playing with Clojurescript things because I think it's sort of interesting and it's a place that I can expand my skill set. It forces me to expand my skill set a little bit more than the server-side Clojure stuff, which I kind of have down, and I have a pretty strong understanding of the JVM, but JavaScript is definitely a bit more of a challenge for me. So Macchiato is Clojurescript on the server side. So it's basically a Clojure. He's trying to write a Clojurescript framework. It basically lets you run apps on Node.js. So not just like you can right now you can compile JavaScript and you can run it in Node and you can call down to all the stuff, all the Node stuff. But he's actually trying to build out a framework to so you kind of have a more Clojure way of doing things on the on that framework. It's extremely new. There's a lot of stuff that just has not been implemented yet, but I thought it was interesting enough. I had enough fun working with it over the last week or two that I thought it would be worth showing off something I had written. And I also, because it uses a few new frameworks that I haven't had a chance to play with yet. So I thought not only can I do some Node.js, I can do some Clojurescript, I can play with some of these other things. Specifically this Biddy, which nobody's talked about Biddy yet, right?
No, but I've heard about it before.
Yeah, so it's just a routing library. So in a
Like Secretary?
I think so.
If you go back up, there was like a chart that shows the Biddy versus the other ones.
Oh, okay. Oh, fight! Let's fight.
Yeah, I think it
Oh, there
claims.
it
So yeah, it claims to be like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Claims
There's
to be
quite a
way
few.
better. More check marks.
Wow, it's got check
Data.
marks in all the columns. Who would have thought?
It's data driven.
Yeah,
The choice is clear.
yeah. So now normally people use Biddy to do like to do it so that you can have the same routes like on the server side and on the JavaScript side, and you can the real advantage is like Composure. When you write a set of routes, you just have a set of routes. So request comes in, and you can go from a request from a URL to a function, to some handler. But if you want to say I want to know the URL for product 45, how do you go from product 45 back to our URL? So that's what the Biddy is, like bidirectional. So if you have a URL, you can get like a description of what the page is that can match and go to a specific handler. Or if you have a specific like piece of data, you can say what's the URL for this. Now I won't be displaying that in my application today because this is there's not a sophisticated enough application, but it is something that's worth looking at, and I have actually seen quite a few people use this in other projects. Primarily, I've seen it used in Clojurescript applications where you're like, hey, what's the like inside of your app, like if you want to link from one page to another page, right? how do you do that? Well, like if I were writing the app, I'd just say like /product/45, but then you're like kind of stuck and you've got all these dependencies in your code. Like the products have to know what the user URLs look like, and the user URLs have to know what the order looks like. Whereas if they can just represent and just say, I want user Bob, right? And then you can, the VIDI can take that representation of the data and translate that to whatever URL you want. So you have more flexibility with your URLs. So. Anyways, another thing, if somebody wants to play with this a little bit, I think it would make a interesting talk. The other new technology that it uses, which I have not used yet, and I only found out about basically a week or so ago, is Mount. I don't know if Mount's going to be a winning choice, but Mount is a sort of an alternative to a component. So there's always, in a Clojure application, you always have the problem of, like, you want to start up a bunch of stuff, right? When your application starts up, you want to start up a bunch of stuff, and you want your stuff to be able to talk to the other stuff in your application, right? So you have some piece of code, and you need it to know how to talk to the database or talk to Redis or something like that. And so early Clojure programs you'd always have like these global variables or even worse, dynamic variables and initialization, and it would all sort of be magically hooked up. And something like component, Stuart Sierra's component, you kind of wire your framework up at the beginning, sort of Spring style, and it instantiates everything and passes references to all the other components. Mount is an interesting approach. And I'll actually show you some of the code here. So if I want the file system component, this is Node.js, I can just def it and say what the start is, and anytime I want to talk to it, I can you kind of dereference it and it pulls it in. Here you can see it's def state for a connection to a database. So you can specify how it gets started and stopped. And the interesting thing is that it can actually there's a notion of dependencies in there that you can kind of pull all your stuff up and find out about it. I have not played with this much, other than just enough to figure out how to make it work inside of Macchiato. But it does look very interesting. Although there was another dependency framework that somebody had come up with. Let me just see if it's on the front page of Clojure Reddit still. No, I don't see it on here right now. So I don't remember what it was, but there was another one that actually looked a little bit more interesting than this to me. But this is the choice he's made with Macchiato, and it's kind of interesting. So I may play with it a little bit more at some point and give like an actual technical talk on how it works. But anyways, that's the stack there, and so I just wanted to show a little demo of an application, and maybe there's some interesting things we can talk about. It also uses Figwheel extensively, but what I have is a hip chat bot written in Serverside Clojurescript. And Dara, I told you should join this room, so you should. I don't know if did you get that? Did you get that? What? If I just clicked on you. No, not all our trade secrets. All right, so if you want to join the burritos room in our hip chat, you can actually send some stuff. But let me show you the code here. All right, so here I've got a Macchiato application. Looks a lot like a Clojure application. I've got some routes. And the interesting route here is going to be the ask route. The ask route, so if I hit the URL, if I go to HTTP localhost, I'm going to get sort of the magic 8-ball response, but of course it's going to expect a hip chat message in. So I'm going to go ahead and run through the whole application here first. So I can say ask, is this talk going to be good? So I've already hooked up the bot here. Oh, Magic 8 Ball says better not tell you now. Will you tell Dar? Without a doubt. All right, and so and they're all color coded, right? Oh, where's my burrito? Is it? You can only ask the 8 Ball yes/no questions. So anyway, so this is the app. It's not very sophisticated, but I'll kind of walk you through it and just show you a little bit of fun. First, I want to show how so here's the code. Let me show you that 8-ball function. So I'm reading all the, so I've got a set of responses here in an Eden file. So if I go into here, right? So these are all the responses it can give you, right? So your outlook good, signs point to yes, reply hazy, try again, right? So all the classic Magic 8-ball responses. And when we get a hip chat message in, I pull out the sender and what their question was, and then I just generate a HTML, generate a JSON response and spit it out. So as simple as possible of an application as you can get here. I'll show you. I'll talk about some of the technology, some of how this works, but just to show you what this looks like. The important things here, I want to actually stop the whole application here. You can see the log on the server side. It's logging the message here. So I'm actually going to stop. I want to show starting up with Figwheel and actually show the whole Node.js process. Kill them, yes. Okay, let's start up fresh. And I'll start my REPL. So I've got nothing running right now. I've still got the server side running, so I'm going to turn off AC bot on the server, too. You can see the dependencies here. It's nothing fancy in terms of dependencies. A few Clojurescript things, Figwheel, and it gives you a little template to start from. So I just started from the template, so it already gave me all the Clojurescript build stuff. All right, REPL startup. So I'm basically starting up a REPL here, so I can start up a Figwheel. There we go. So Figwheel. So I'm basically gonna, what is it? So I'm gonna start up Figwheel. So I load my REPL, start up Figwheel. So when you start Figwheel, it's taking all your Clojurescript files, compiling them down to JavaScript, and then it's setting up a little process to monitor the changes and write out changes to it. So after I do that, I can start the Clojurescript REPL. And there's nothing there because there's no Node.js process. To start up the Node process, I just say Node and the JavaScript file to start. Node.js is now started. It's loaded up all of my code, and you see my Clojurescript REPL is here. I can actually interact with it. JS/console.log hello, which I really don't have to do because I could just do print line. But I feel it's more like convincing as a JavaScript thing if you don't say print line and you say JS/console.log. But no, you can do all of your So I'm like I can actually require call the require function of Node.js, actually pull in something. So I'm actually in the live environment. And the really cool thing is I can actually interact with we've shown Figwheel before. CPF browse. So I can actually interact with things. So I can eval, or I can actually call read file responses.eden. I have to be in the right namespace. There we go. So I can actually, you can actually call it, and that's calling it, doing all the Clojurescript stuff. I can do all of my code navigation. So if I want to know what, what is this OK method doing? And you can navigate in. So all, so the Figwheel really gets all the Clojurescript stuff down, so that it's pretty much as good as working with a Clojurescript. I can actually eval things. So if I were to say, so if I say def x1 and I save the file, then you can see Figwheel reloaded. So I can ask it what x is, right? But I can actually, I can actually eval directly into the Node.js. So if I do Control-XE just on that one expression, I come down here and ask, you notice there was no, here, let me do that again. So you won't see a reload here. So it's actually got all, not only do you have like the Figwheel auto reloading, but you've kind of got the Emacs live evaluation, which is really nice. The one thing I couldn't do well is I really wanted to do this and run, because I wanted to run, I've got the same code here deployed on a DigitalOcean machine, right? And so I really wanted to run this here and connect my connect my Fig wheel into that remote server. I actually tried first running this all on DigitalOcean, but my DigitalOcean machine was like only 512 megabytes, and apparently I was missing something, and Java just apparently is not satisfied with 512 megabytes without some additional configuration, which I didn't really feel like doing because I didn't feel like I should have to. So I couldn't run the whole thing and run Figwheel on that machine, so I said, well, let me just run Node.js and let me connect the REPL in from the local side. So I actually tried that, and it actually worked, except for the fact that Figwheel, in this mode at least, writes its temporary files out to disk, and then it tells the Node.js to read it in from disk. And so if Figwheel was running on my local machine, but I have the port proxy to the remote machine, it would tell the REPL, I could interact with it, but it couldn't actually load those files in. So there may be a Figwheel way to do that. But it was pretty cool that I was actually able to connect my Clojurescript REPL in my Emacs on my Mac to the Node.js process running in DigitalOcean. So I was like, I really felt like I really got a lot of confidence in the tooling, because it could do, except for the one Figwheel problem of assuming you're on the same machine, everything was really nice there. So let's talk about a few of the things. The big thing to remember here is that Node.js is all asynchronous. So for instance, Macchiato isn't sophisticated enough to by default pull the body of a message out. And in Node.js, you have to do this complicated stuff of saying, you have to do all these callbacks. So I have to say on when there's data and build this up. So you see, I built this with body here to extract the body of the JSON, right? Fine for parameters. So I actually had to say with body, and then I had to pass it the continuation function using JavaScript. This simply because Macchiato doesn't provide. It's so new, right? It's only a couple weeks old. I kind of had to write that myself. Other than that, everything worked fine. I was able to read in. I was able to generate my JSON response, content type application JSON, and just spit it out. I couldn't pull these from a database yet. Well, I could, but only by doing like Node.js specific things. They don't have they just haven't solved. It's still actively under development. In fact, in the week that I was playing with this, pretty much the whole thing changed, and I had to rewrite my app. Right, so it's not ready. It's not ready, but the Clojurian Slack, they do have a no, that's the Clojure. They do have a Macchiato room here. So there's they were really helpful, and I asked a few questions and talked to a few people in the room to get some examples and figure out what you can do. They have a demo app where they take it and actually call out to a remote web service and get the result back, and so they've built a few abstractions for doing those kind of things. But there's a lot of promise there, and I just thought it was really a lot of fun to be able to write a full application in Clojurescript. And now one of their demo, obviously I stole the idea from, there is a Macchiato examples, cat facts. So you can see that some of the code looks very similar. They're doing except for this was a Slack bot. So their example was for Slack bot, and I look in our Clojurian Slack, and I didn't have permission. Like, I had permissions for some other Slacks that were not Clojure related, but the Clojure Slack doesn't give people the ability to make their own integrations. So I said, well, fine, if you're not going to let me do this, I'll just go to HipChat and and use our work HipChat, and I was able to use the same techniques, but they've got a cat picture where they actually go out to the cat API. So by the way, if you need an API, I think this is one of the new coolest APIs. It's possible that Jonathan used this for something once. Oh no, I actually just pulled the URL. Where's the... Oh, I see. It's not redirecting. I have to paste it each time. But anyways, you call this, and every time you get a new cat picture. So they created the /cat command, or where is it? GIF But anyways, you call this, and it would insert a cat picture into your Slack. And this is very useful because if you have a grumpy person on your team who hates it when you post pictures into your group chat, this is the perfect command to show them how wrong and backwards their opinion is. So no, I'm not talking to you, Charles, if you're watching, which he's not. So, so yeah. So that's the only thing it was doing here is just using this HTTP client, and it's all to pull that back. So I don't have a whole lot more to show other than the fact that hopefully you can see it's really pretty easy. You can line new Macchiato an app. You can they do give you, I should show project.clj. There it is. They give you some aliases, so the build, so that you can build, so you can run npm install and figwheel dev. Now, I don't like to do figwheel dev outside of, a lot of people do figwheel, don't use, the Emacs stuff. So a lot of people run figwheel separately, and then you just edit the source code and save it, and it auto reloads. But I like to do it with an Emacs, which is why you saw me run Emacs and do the start figwheel. That's the same one as figwheel dev. If you want to package it, it's the same stuff except for it does a release build. So if I had done line package, it will build up a single JavaScript file without the figwheel instrumentation. And let me show you. And then so if I were to take this target release ACBot, I could just run that node acbot.js. Now there is in my code base, there is that responses.eden, so that would also need to be on the file system when you run it. But you take those two, the resources and the code, and that's your full application. They also give you in the thing a proc file. So I had toyed with, sorry. You can see I'm making a lot of keyboard errors because of what we were talking about, right? Even more than I normally fumble a lot during demos. So they give you a proc file. You can run this, but I actually didn't know enough about Heroku to figure out how I can make Heroku actually build my Clojurescript app to generate that JS file and then run it. I ran it in Heroku, just passing, like giving it the actual static files and saying, hey, run this in Node.js. Works fine, but I wanted to actually, do the whole Heroku thing where I push a change and it pushes the code out. But because of the build step, now Heroku supports doing pre-install and have a few steps, but those pre-install steps, to answer your question, are Java related, right? They have to do line Clojurescript build. So then you need to have JavaScript and line again, and it started to be I was spending more time trying to figure out all the Heroku stuff than playing with what I actually wanted to. So I didn't get there, but I think it would be really nice to be able to take this and actually put a whole Heroku workflow. And if anybody does know Heroku, tell me downstairs how to if there's a good way to do that, because I think that would be really nice. Because right now, here's my deploy process: rsync all the files over. And then, and I'm actually rsyncing the dev code. You see I'm doing target out. So really what I should be doing is doing a release and then copying that one release file. So when I start Node.js on the server, it's telling me, hey, where's my Clojurescript? Where's my figwheel? Where's my figwheel? Hey, you got a figwheel? But that's only because I'm running it in figwheel mode instead of copying the non-figwheel code out there. And that's just so that I have a faster cycle, and I can ignore those Clojurescript reload messages. All right. Well, that's my lightning talk on Macchiato. If you're curious about it, give it a try. I had a lot of fun.
Do you know if this is going to affect his work on Luminous?
I hope it does, because I don't like Luminous.
I like Luminous.
No.
Luminous is pretty awesome.
I'm anti-magic, and I'm really pro understanding all the stuff that you're putting into your application. And I feel like people who I feel like a lot of Luminous is really great when you just want to play with stuff, right? But I feel like once you've figured out what you want to do, you should throw away your Luminous app and go, reassemble the pieces, right? It's really good. You got a bunch of stuff and you just want to put together a demo. But I guess I've worked with enough people. It's like, okay, I created this Luminous app and I have no idea what it's doing.
That's what it was to start with, for sure. It was just it was pure magic. But then, I guess, when we've used it long enough now, it feels like I understand what the different different pieces.
Well,
are
if
trying
you
to
understand
do.
your application and could reassemble it from pieces, I forgive you for using it, and
It'd take a while.
I support. Yeah, no,
It wouldn't
exactly.
be trivial.
No, I guess I like that. This is my personal prejudice, but I'm like I hate seeing stuff in my application and then there's some magic that happens over here in this corner, right? Whether it's the security part or the templating part. It's like I don't really know. It's like really it's your application. You should kind of know what it does, right? Like. But for prototyping or something, I think it's pretty cool. But if I were starting a new project, I would personally not start it with Luminous, other than just like start it with Luminous, play with it, get an idea of what technologies I want to use, and then I would go build it outside. That's just me, right? That's I think that says more about me than Luminous, but
It's not as
It is
plug and play as he claims it to be.
yeah.
He's hoping that it'll be like this really easy, like Clojure web development is like trivially easy.
Well,
which-
it's sort of an app. It's just an app generator, right? It just generates your starting point, and that's certainly fine. But unless you if you want to see how would I put together an app, what would an application look like if I put X, Y, and Z together? Okay, here it is. Let me play with it. I like that. But after you get that, the code it gives you is really not great, right? It's just I don't know. I'm not
pretty much just throw in the majority of of
yeah.
it and you just
That's the other
put
thing.
your new code into it.
Yeah, and but it's really great that stuff like that exists, because let's say I want to sit down with you and you're like, hey, we want to build something just to play with something. We need of course you would put up Luminous, because you don't want to spend the first hour of your project assembling your stuff together, right? Now, if this is your work project or something that's going to have some life, well, maybe spending an hour, assembling the pieces, assembling some Lego pieces, is not a terrible thing. But if we're at a hack day, or we're like, hey, let's just have some fun with something, then by all means you want, in my opinion, you want something like that to push it out. But to me, I put it in the toy compartment, not professional tool department. But that's just me. All right, cool. I will say I was able to, with this Node.js, I was able to put new things in the Node. So I don't know how many of you do Node.js, but normally you have a package.json and you put dependencies. So I can put any Node.js dependency in here, and then I can just JS require it into my app and completely work with it. So if I wanted to write a Node.js app using Clojurescript and with all the callbacks and stuff, I could do everything that Node.js could do. There's no limitations there, and I tried it with a couple libraries and another, in a little demo project. It was all great, and I started down that road with what I did with the with body, just so I could get that JSON response in. But the goal of this is not to write a Node.js, not to write a sales app or something like that. It's to write a Clojure-ish app. And so they're actually trying to build a Clojure framework that runs on Node.js for the advantages of the platform. And you could use some Node.js libraries, but you'd really be working within the framework. That's their goal. So. All right. Well, that's it.
Thanks.
We don't have a topic for January yet. If somebody wants to talk, especially about some of the stuff that we've been talking about, as you can see, a demo just has to be, you don't actually have to know anything about what you're showing. You just have to do something and say, hey, this is what I did, and maybe other people will be interested. But I think NOLA will be organizing the January meeting, so you might actually know what it is more than 2 days before the meeting. All right. Well, if you're gonna stick around, we'll be downstairs at the little hotel bar. And I will be glad to show more Node.js if you're interested.
So were you guys part of the original Connect acquisition?
Norman was.
Yeah. You came in after, right?
Yeah, I came in.
Yeah. I was around from the early days.
Are you guys still using, I assume obviously, but I guess how much, using Clojure for
more than we did before. I mean, we've grown, like, we built most of the app using, it was, basically like 3 developers on the Clojure side. So,
Awesome.
yeah, so we do Clojure and Go. All of our, like, hardware management and stuff is Go, and then all of our UI and data analysis and all of that is Clojure. And now we have, we started with like 3 Clojure people, and now we have a dozen, 15, 20 on multiple teams. So we've,
That's cool. Yeah, we have 3 Clojure people.
yeah. So the cool thing, one of the nice things I think about Clojure is you don't
How you do
need.
it in a distributed team or as the team grows, but if you're 3 to 12, I mean, that's very manageable.
Yeah. I mean, you can do a lot with very few people in Clojure, right? In fact, I feel like, having to, like, the only reason we can support 20 people, well, probably, I guess we have probably, between the 2 or 3 teams, we have, maybe, anyways, maybe a dozen Clojurists. But, we've grown, not because we needed more people on the teams, but because we had more teams that we wanted, more things to do that were, more new projects. But I feel like, I feel like a Clojure team of 3 or 4 people can do what a Java team of, a dozen can do, right? And Clojure's not unique in that. I mean, maybe it's unique in the sense that it might take you a 5 Rubyists to do 12 Java developers work. I don't know what the actual numbers would be.
Cool. Thank you, Norm. Appreciate it. Hey, are you guys, I didn't catch your name. Justin, you guys said you were, are you guys